I still wake up some nights, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything unraveled so quickly. One moment, I was a man preparing to marry the woman I loved. The next, I was gone, disappeared without a trace, leaving behind the life I thought we were building together. Her name was Margot. From the moment I met her, I was convinced she was different. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only man in the world. The way she laughed at my terrible jokes, the way she'd reach for my hand absent-mindedly while we walked, it all felt so genuine, so real. For 4 years, I lived under the illusion that I had found my person, that we were unshakable. The wedding was just weeks away. We had picked the venue together, debated over napkin colors, and even argued about whether we should do an open bar, her idea, or keep it simple, mine. It was normal, the kind of small disagreements every couple has. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. She had been distant. Not cold, not cruel, just not as present as she used to be. She was on her phone more often, smiling at messages she never shared. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she was just trying to soak in these last few moments before we became husband and wife. Then, one evening, she mentioned a small gathering with some friends. A pre-bachelorette celebration, nothing major. Just a fun night out. She told me about it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I remember watching her get ready that night, sitting on the edge of our bed while she stood in front of the mirror. She looked stunning, her hair curled just the way she liked, her dress hugging her in all the right ways. But there was something off. When she caught me staring, she smirked and said, "What? You act like I've never gone out before." I forced a laugh. "Just taking it all in," I told her. "You look beautiful." She kissed me quickly. "Don't wait up," she said. I told myself to let it go. That she deserved a night out, that I was being ridiculous for feeling uneasy. But something about the way she had said it, "Don't wait up," stuck with me. That night, sleep never came. I tossed and turned, my mind spiraling into places I didn't want to go. When she still wasn't home by 3 a.m., I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her location. What I saw made my stomach drop. She wasn't at a restaurant or a friend's apartment. She was at a private residence on the other side of town, somewhere she had never mentioned before. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Every rational part of me tried to justify it. Maybe one of her friends lived there. Maybe they had just decided to move the party. But deep down, I knew. And still, I waited. When she finally came home, the sun was already creeping through the blinds. I listened as she tiptoed through the door, trying to be quiet, as if I wasn't lying awake, drowning in suspicion. She smelled different. Not like perfume. Not like sweat. Just different. I didn't say anything. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me crack. I had no proof. No confirmation. Just a gut feeling that the woman I was about to marry had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even begin to understand. And I knew in that moment that I would never look at her the same way again. I lay there, listening to Margot move through the apartment, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to entertain. I could hear her slipping off her heels, the soft rustling of fabric as she changed, the quiet exhale of exhaustion as she climbed into bed beside me. She must have thought I was asleep because she didn't say a word. No whispered apology, no explanation, just silence. But I wasn't asleep. My body was frozen in place, my breathing measured, my heart pounding in my chest. I had spent the entire night convincing myself I was overthinking, that there had to be a logical reason for her location being somewhere she had never mentioned before, that maybe I was just an idiot for checking it all. But the way she crept in like a thief, like someone who knew they had something to hide, shattered that illusion. I could feel the warmth of her body close to mine, but for the first time since we had met, she felt like a stranger. I wanted to confront her, to sit up, turn on the light, and demand to know the truth. But I was afraid of what she might say, afraid of what I might hear. Afraid that the life we had built, the future I had planned, was already gone, and I just hadn't realized it yet. Instead, I waited. The next morning, she woke up before me, slipping out of bed with a groggy sigh. I listened as she shuffled into the bathroom, the sound of the shower turning on, the soft hum of her voice as she mindlessly sang to herself. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just come home at dawn from a place I couldn't explain. I forced myself to get up, walking into the kitchen and making coffee, my hands still unsteady. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping wet, she smiled at me like nothing had changed. "Morning," she said, leaning in for a quick kiss. I let her do it, even though every fiber of my being was screaming that something was off. "You were out late," I said carefully, watching her reaction. She yawned, stretching her arms. Yeah, the girls wanted to keep the party going, so we went to Kelly's cousin's place. I meant to text, but I figured you'd be asleep anyway. I studied her. The way she avoided my eyes just a little too much. The way she casually threw out a name I had never heard before. The way she so effortlessly lied to me. And I knew. I didn't know the details. I didn't have a confession. I didn't have proof, but I knew. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe her. Yeah, I crashed early, I said, taking a sip of coffee that suddenly tasted bitter. Glad you had fun. She beamed, walking past me to get dressed, completely unaware that my mind was unraveling everything we had. The rest of the day felt surreal. I went through the motions, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was spiraling. I replayed every conversation we had in the past few weeks, every moment that suddenly felt suspicious. The late nights, the sudden need for more space, the way she had started locking her phone when she never used to. And then, I made a decision. I needed to know the truth. That night, after Margot fell asleep, I took her phone. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. Thankfully, she hadn't changed her passcode. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her messages, looking for something, anything, that would tell me I was wrong. But I wasn't. I found the group chat first, a conversation with her so-called girlfriends. Except it wasn't just them. There were other names in there. Names I didn't recognize. And messages that made my stomach churn. Last night was insane. Can't believe we finally got her to come. She was nervous at first, but damn, did she loosen up fast. Told you she'd love it. Think she'll come back next time? I felt sick. My vision blurred as I clicked on the attached photos. They weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. Margot, at a house I had never seen before. Surrounded by people I didn't know. Holding a drink, laughing, looking happier than I had seen her in weeks. I clenched my jaw, scrolling further, my breath coming in short bursts. And then I found the worst part. A private message. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about it. You're something else. Sent to her. From a name I had never seen before. And her response? You're trouble. But I had fun winking face dot. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just some drunken bad decision. She had planned this. She had chosen this. And the worst part? She had come home to me afterward, kissed me like nothing had happened, and slept beside me like I was nothing. I sat there, gripping the edge of the bed, my mind racing through 1,000 different emotions, rage, heartbreak, disbelief. But one thing became crystal clear. The woman I was supposed to marry wasn't the woman I thought she was. And this wedding? It was never going to happen. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the messages, the photos, the smirk in her text that felt like a slap in the face. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully while my entire world was caving in. I thought about waking her up, demanding answers right then and there, forcing her to admit what she had done. But what would that change? She would lie. She would gaslight me, make me feel crazy for even asking. I had seen it before, heard the stories from other men who had been in my shoes. I never thought I'd be one of them. Morning came, and with it, a twisted sense of clarity. Margot moved through the apartment like it was any other day, completely unaware that I knew the truth. She kissed me on the cheek, poured herself a cup of coffee, and scrolled through her phone, probably texting the very people who had helped her betray me. I watched her, studied her every move, searching for guilt, hesitation, anything that showed she regretted what she had done. But there was nothing. Hey, she said casually, glancing up at me. We still need to go over the seating chart for the wedding. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The wedding. The wedding that would never happen. The wedding she still had the audacity to pretend was real while sneaking around behind my back. I forced a smile, nodding. Yeah, we should. I knew then that I couldn't just end it in some big, dramatic confrontation. I needed to disappear. To walk away in a way that left her completely blindsided, the same way she had blindsided me. Let her feel the shock, the confusion, the emptiness. Let her wake up one morning expecting to be a bride, and instead find nothing but silence. But first, I had to make sure she would never see it coming. The rest of the day, I played my part. I talked about the wedding like I still cared, nodded along when she mentioned final dress fittings and floral arrangements. I even agreed when she suggested we have dinner with her parents that weekend. All the while, I was planning my exit. As soon as she left for work, I got to work. I called my best friend, Jonah, the only person I knew I could trust. When I told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Damn," he finally said. "You sure you don't want to confront her?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No. She'll lie. She'll twist it. I don't want the drama, Jonah. I just want out." He exhaled. "All right, man. What do you need? Help me disappear." And just like that, the plan was set. I started small. I took the essentials, my passport, a few changes of clothes, the important documents I didn't want her to have access to. I transferred money to a new account, making sure she wouldn't be able to touch a cent of it. I canceled the lease on our apartment, sending the notice to our landlord under my name only. She would have no warning. Then, I wrote the letter. It took me hours to get the words right, to figure out how to tell her exactly what she had done to me without ever raising my voice. In the end, I kept it simple. "Margot, I know. I know about the party. I know about the messages. I know about the man you spent the night with while I was at home, thinking we were building a life together. I know it all. I won't waste my breath asking why. It doesn't matter anymore. I just wanted you to know that I see you for who you really are now. There won't be a wedding. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I hope whatever you were looking for that night was worth it. Don't bother trying to find me." I signed my name, folded the letter, and left it on the kitchen counter where she would see it the second she walked in. Then, without a second glance, I walked out the door. I didn't take a single thing that reminded me of her. I didn't give myself time to mourn the life I had lost. Because the truth was, that life had never existed in the first place. It was all a lie. As I drove away, leaving behind the city, the apartment, and the woman I had once thought I would grow old with, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. The strangest thing about disappearing is how easy it actually is. People always assume it takes meticulous planning, months of preparation, a whole new identity. But really, it's just a matter of walking away and refusing to look back. As I drove out of town, I kept expecting to feel regret, some overwhelming urge to turn the car around and beg Margot for an explanation. But the further I got, the more I realized there was nothing left to salvage. What could she possibly say? That it was a mistake? That it didn't mean anything? I had seen the messages, the photos. I had read her own words, laced with excitement and flirtation, with no sign of guilt or hesitation. No, I didn't need an explanation. I needed distance. Jonah had set me up with a temporary place, a cabin in the middle of nowhere, a few hours outside of the city. It belonged to his uncle, who only used it during hunting season, and it was exactly what I needed. No internet, no noise, no reminders of what my life had just become. Just me, the quiet, and a stack of books I hadn't touched in years. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The cabin was small but sturdy, tucked away between thick pine trees that smelled like rain. I stepped out of the car, stretching my legs, feeling the weight of the last few days settle deep into my bones. Inside, the place was simple. Wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and furniture that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s. I didn't care. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. For the first few hours, I just sat there, staring out the window, trying to process everything. It still didn't feel real. The wedding invitations had already gone out. Our families were expecting a celebration, a future, a life we had promised to each other. But while I had been picturing forever, Margot had been sneaking out to what? To chase some cheap thrill? To feel something I apparently couldn't give her? I shook the thought away. It didn't matter. It wouldn't change anything. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my daze. A text from Jonah. "Did you do it?" I hesitated before typing back. "Yeah, I'm out." A few seconds later, another message. "You okay?" That was a harder question. Was I okay? I wasn't sure. There was no word for the kind of numbness I felt. I didn't reply. I turned my phone off instead, tossing it onto the coffee table. The next few days were a blur of silence. I woke up late, sat outside for hours, let the sun warm my face while my mind drifted between anger and emptiness. I tried not to think about Margot, but she lingered in the back of my mind like a ghost. Her laugh, her voice, the way she had looked at me just days ago as if nothing was wrong. I wondered when she had found my letter, if she had read it with shock, with guilt, or if she had simply scoffed and shrugged, already planning her next night out. I wondered if she was trying to call me, if she was reaching out to friends, asking where I had gone. Not that I would ever know. My phone stayed off. On the fourth day, Jonah showed up unannounced, a six-pack in one hand and a bag of takeout in the other. Figured you could use a beer, he said, stepping inside like he owned the place. And some actual food. You look like hell. I let out a short laugh, the first real one in days. Thanks. I feel like hell. We sat outside on the porch, drinking in silence, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees the only thing filling the space between us. You ever think about what you're going to do next? He finally asked. I exhaled slowly, staring at the horizon. Not really. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to exist without feeling like my entire life was a lie. Jonah nodded, taking a sip of his beer. That's fair. For a long time, neither of us spoke. And honestly, I was grateful for it. I didn't want advice. I didn't want reassurances. I just wanted to sit in the wreckage for a while, let the dust settle before I decided what came next. One thing was certain, though. I wasn't going back. The first few days after I vanished felt surreal, like I had stepped into a different version of my life where nothing made sense. The quiet of the cabin was both a blessing and a curse. It gave me space to think, but at the same time, it made everything too real. I didn't have the distractions of the city, the noise of daily life, or the mindless routine of wedding preparations. Instead, I had the weight of what had happened pressing down on me, filling every moment with an overwhelming mix of anger, confusion, and something I refused to name grief. I had spent years building a life with Margot, convinced she was the woman I would grow old with. Now, that version of my life had been ripped away in the most humiliating way possible. I wasn't just dealing with a broken relationship. I was dealing with the fact that the person I had trusted the most had been living a double life right under my nose. The betrayal wasn't just in what she had done. It was in how effortlessly she had lied, how she had looked me in the eyes every day and made me believe she loved me. And now, she was probably freaking out, wondering where I had gone. I hadn't turned my phone back on since I left. I didn't want to see her name pop up. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her fake apologies, her desperate attempts to spin the situation into something that could be salvaged. I had made my choice. I was done with her. But that didn't mean she was done with me. I knew she would come looking. And I was right. On the morning of the sixth day, I finally cracked and turned my phone on. It wasn't out of curiosity. I just needed to check my bank accounts, make sure everything was still in order. But the moment the screen lit up, I was bombarded with missed calls, voicemails, and texts, most of them from Margot. I scrolled through the notifications, my stomach twisting as I read the desperate messages. Where are you? What is this? Come home. Let's talk about this. Please, I need to see you. This is insane. You're overreacting. At least tell me you're safe. The messages started off frantic, then softened into pleading, then, slowly, into frustration. The last few texts were shorter, colder. You're being ridiculous. If you're going to run away like a coward, maybe it's for the best. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. There she was. The real Margot. The one who couldn't handle losing control. I didn't reply. I didn't even listen to the voicemails. I put the phone down, exhaling slowly. She wasn't sorry. She was just upset that I had walked away before she could manipulate me into staying. A part of me wondered how long she had been planning to tell me, or if she had ever intended to tell me at all. Would she have gone through with the wedding, pretending everything was fine? Would she have stood in front of our friends and family, saying vows she didn't mean? The thought made me sick. By the time Jonah showed up again, I had already decided I wasn't going to waste another second thinking about her. He parked his truck beside mine, stepping out with 2 grocery bags in his hands. Figured you were probably living off canned soup by now, he said, tossing them onto the counter. I snorted. Not far off. Jonah grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracking it open before leaning against the counter. So, you gonna tell me what's next? Or are you just planning on becoming a mountain hermit? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know. I feel like, if I go back, I have to deal with everything. The questions, the drama, the looks from people who will feel sorry for me. He nodded. Yeah, you will. But you also can't stay out here forever. I knew he was right. As much as I wanted to stay hidden, to avoid the mess entirely, I couldn't put my life on hold just because of Margot's betrayal. I needed to figure out what moving forward looked like, even if I had no idea where to start. Jonah studied me for a moment before setting his beer down. Look, man, I know you don't want to hear this, but she's probably gonna keep reaching out. She's not the type to just let this go. I scoffed. Yeah, I got that impression. You planning on answering her? I shook my head. No. There's nothing left to say. Jonah shrugged. Good. Because knowing her, she's probably already working on a way to spin this. Make herself the victim. I thought about the last message she had sent, calling me a coward, acting like I was the one who had betrayed her. It was almost funny how quickly she had turned. Almost. I exhaled, looking out the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze. I just need to figure out what's next, I murmured. Jonah clapped a hand on my shoulder. Then let's figure it out. And for the first time since I left, I actually believed that was possible. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the closest I had felt to it in days. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it wasn't the kind that clouded my thoughts anymore. It was focused now, sharp and cold, fueling my next steps instead of paralyzing me. Margot was still trying to reach me. I knew it before I even turned my phone back on. It had become a routine, checking my messages just to confirm that nothing had changed, that she was still in the stage of desperately trying to control the narrative. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. But something about the last message she had sent stayed with me. If you're going to run away like a coward, maybe it's for the best. I almost laughed when I read it. I was the coward? She was the one who had betrayed me, who had thrown away everything we had for a few nights of excitement. And yet, in her mind, I was the one at fault because I refused to let her gaslight me into staying. It was the kind of logic that made me realize just how little I had really known about her. I spent the day cleaning up the cabin, trying to give myself some sense of control. Jonah had left early that morning, promising to check in later, but I didn't need company. What I needed was a plan, something concrete to work toward. The first step was cutting Margot out of my life for good. I sat down at the small wooden table, opened my laptop, and started going through every last connection we had, joint accounts, shared subscriptions, anything that still tied me to her. One by one, I severed them. I transferred my money into a private account, canceled my name off our lease, which, thankfully, had only ever been under my credit, and made sure she had no legal way to reach me. As I worked, I imagined her reaction. I pictured her scrolling through her bank app, seeing the balance at zero. I pictured her calling the landlord, confused as to why she suddenly had to handle everything on her own. Would she be angry? Would she cry? Would she even care? That last thought gnawed at me more than I wanted to admit. I wanted her to care. Not because I wanted her back, God, no, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. But that wasn't my concern anymore. By mid-afternoon, I had done everything I needed to do. The next step was figuring out what my life looked like now. I had a good job back in the city. Technically, I could go back anytime. But the idea of returning to the same streets, the same places where I had built a life with Margot, made my skin crawl. Everywhere I went would be a reminder. Every familiar face would come with questions, pitying looks, unwanted conversations. I couldn't do that. Not yet. So, I made a decision. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and found the number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. Didn't expect to hear from you. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. Hey, Dad. There was a pause. Then, you okay? It was a simple question, but something about the way he asked it, the way he knew something was wrong without me saying a word, almost broke me. I swallowed hard. Not really. Another pause. Then, without hesitation, he said, come home. And just like that, I had my next move. I packed my bags that night. It was strange, stuffing everything I owned into a single duffel, realizing how little I actually needed. A few clothes, my laptop, the essentials. Everything else could stay. None of it mattered anymore. The drive back to my hometown was long, stretching across miles of open highway, the sky darkening as I put more and more distance between myself and the life I had left behind. I hadn't been back in years. Not since my mom passed. My dad and I had never been particularly close. He was the quiet, reserved type, the kind of man who showed love in practical ways rather than words. When I left for the city, I never expected to return. But now, I had nowhere else to go. When I finally pulled up to the old house, the porch light was on, casting a dim glow against the worn wooden steps. The sight of it sent a strange mix of emotions through me, nostalgia, relief, something close to grief. The front door opened before I even stepped out of the car. My dad stood there, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He looked older than I remembered, the lines on his face deeper, his hair more gray than not. I shut the car door and exhaled. Hey. He nodded, stepping aside. Come in. The house smelled the same. Old wood, coffee, something faintly familiar that I couldn't quite place. I set my bag down in the hallway, suddenly feeling out of place in my own childhood home. My dad motioned toward the kitchen. "You hungry?" I almost laughed. Of course, that was his first response. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just a quiet, unspoken offer of comfort in the only way he knew how. "Yeah," I admitted. He nodded, turning toward the stove. "Good. Sit down." I did. And for the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Sitting in my childhood home, I felt like I had stepped into another version of myself, one I had long buried. The wooden kitchen table was the same one I had eaten at as a kid, the scratches and dents in it telling stories of a life before I ever met Margot, before I ever knew what betrayal felt like. My dad moved around the kitchen with the same quiet efficiency he always had, pulling out a skillet, cracking eggs, flipping bacon. He didn't ask any questions. Not yet. He just let the silence settle between us, unhurried, giving me space to speak when I was ready. It took me a long time to say anything. "She cheated," I finally muttered, staring down at the grain of the table. "That's why I left." I heard him pause, just for a second, but he didn't look surprised. He simply let out a slow breath, scraping the bacon onto a plate. "Yeah," he said, setting it in front of me. "Figured it was something like that." I frowned, looking up at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, sitting down across from me with his own plate. "You sounded different on the phone. And I know you. You wouldn't just up and leave unless you had no other choice." I picked up a fork, pushing my eggs around. "I did have a choice," I muttered. "I could have stayed. I could have confronted her. I could have let her explain herself. Would that have changed anything?" I clenched my jaw. "No." "Then you did the right thing." I let out a bitter laugh. "Doesn't feel like it." He chewed his food slowly, thoughtful. "Not yet," he admitted. "But it will." I wasn't sure if I believed that. We ate in silence after that, the only sound the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional clink of silverware. It was strange how normal it felt, like I hadn't just abandoned my entire life. Like I hadn't just left behind a woman who had once been my whole future. When we finished, my dad stood up and grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge, sliding one across the table to me. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the back porch. "Let's sit outside for a bit." I followed him out, stepping into the warm night air. The backyard looked smaller than I remembered, the old oak tree still standing tall in the corner, its branches stretching out like they had when I was a kid. We sat down on the worn wooden chairs, the ones that had been there for as long as I could remember. My dad cracked open his beer, took a sip, then leaned back, watching the sky. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "You know, your mother and I had our problems too." I blinked, caught off guard. He never talked about my mom like that. Not since she passed. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He exhaled, rolling the bottle between his hands. "She never cheated, but we had our rough patches. Marriage ain't always what people think it'll be. Sometimes you wake up next to someone and realize you don't know them at all." I swallowed hard. That's exactly how I had felt in those last days with Margot. Like she was a stranger in my own home. "She ever do anything to make you doubt her?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. But that's not the point. The point is, people show you who they are when they think you're not looking. You just have to decide whether or not to believe them." I stared down at my beer, his words settling in. "She showed you, son," he said simply. "And you believed her." I didn't know what to say to that. We sat there for a long time, just staring at the stars, the weight of everything pressing down on me. For the first time since I had left, I felt something shift inside me, like I wasn't just running anymore. Like maybe I was finally moving forward. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It wasn't that everything was suddenly fine, far from it. But for the first time since my world had been flipped upside down, I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I stepped outside into the early morning air, the scent of pine and fresh-cut grass filling my lungs. My dad was already on the porch, sipping coffee from an old mug that had probably been there since I was a kid. He didn't say anything as I sat down beside him. For a long time, we just sat there, watching the sun rise over the backyard. Then, finally, he spoke. "So, what's next?" It was the question I had been avoiding, the one I hadn't been ready to face. But now, I wasn't afraid of it. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think that's okay." He nodded, taking another sip of coffee. "Yeah, it is." I thought about the life I had left behind, the apartment I would never step foot in again, the wedding that would never happen, the woman I had once believed would be my forever. It was all gone now, but for the first time, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. I turned to my dad. I think I want to stay for a while. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. I figured you might. And just like that, I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.